I once was accosted by a military police in a large city of East Africa. He stopped me while driving my van with my family on board. His claim was that I had driven through a stop sign. I asked where the sign was since I had not noticed the stop sign. Well, he finally said that the sign had been uprooted, but that was no reason for me not to stop. So he asked that we go to the police station. He climbed into our van with his machine gun and sat next to our two small children whose eyes by now were wide open. But I objected in going to the police station. Instead, I suggested that I would like to see this man, and I pointed to the business card which I took out of my wallet. He instantly said that I could drop him off anywhere here and I could be on my way. The card that I had shown him was a friend of mine, who was the top man of the Central Intelligence Division of the nation. This week, international speaker Doug Batchelor speaks about someone else who went to see the man at the top of the nation.
You know, it's always exciting doing the Bible Answer program every week, and people call in, they're looking for answers. There's so many people out there wondering, what is the purpose of life? What is the truth? And we're living in a culture right now where folks are being taught, well, truth is whatever you want it to be. If you believe it, it's true. It's kind of called, relativism, pluralism. It's just, you got your truth and I got my truth. And I always think that's the most absurd thing in the world. If you got a brain surgeon who's going to work on you, you're going to want him to know what the truth is about the brain. You're not going to want him to think it doesn't matter, brain, cauliflower, orange, it doesn't matter to me. You believe it's a brain, I believe that it's a mushroom. So just whatever you believe, as long as you're sincere, it doesn't matter. People, you hear all these very interesting philosophical speeches about, just as long as you're sincere about your truth is true for you, my truth is true for me. They'll never say that to an airplane pilot when they get on the plane. Say whatever you happen to believe about aerodynamic design, if that's what you believe, that's fine for you. And he says, I think maybe we could use this craft as a submarine today because I'm sincere. There are absolutes. And, it's always been that way, and there's only one truth. There's one Lord, one faith, one baptism. There's one truth, and Jesus says, I am the truth. His Bible says, thy word is truth. Anything out there that contradicts the word, it is not truth. She wanted to know the truth, so she made this trip. A little excerpt from the Writings of Josephus I thought I'd share with you. He said, and this is from the Jewish historian Flavius Josephus, when this queen heard of the virtue and the prudence of Solomon, she had a great mind to see him. She being desirous to be satisfied by her own experience and not by bare hearing, for reports thus heard likely enough are likely to comply with false opinion. She resolved to come to him in order to have a trial of his wisdom, while she proposed questions of a very great difficulty and entreated that he would solve their hidden meaning. And the Bible says there was nothing more difficult that he could not answer her. Now, does God want us to seek after his wisdom? Does he enjoy when we ask him questions and we're thinking? Doesn't God want us to use the noodle that he gave us? He says, come now, let us reason together. Come, let us reason together. Something else you notice, she's coming to see a king. She brings an offering. 1 Kings 10:10, she gave the king 120 talents of gold. That's about 7,200 pounds of gold. And a very great store of spices, probably thousands of pounds of frankincense and myrrh and all these precious spices. No spices like that had ever come before. She thought, if I'm going to go seek after the most important thing, I'm going to bring my best gift. Even Solomon says, a man's gift makes room for him and brings him before great men. She said, I want some time with the king, and maybe I'll hear back from him. Maybe he'll have time for me. I know I'm a queen and everything, but if you're going to go see a king, and you're able, you should bring. And she didn't just bring the gift of a poor person, she brought the gift of a queen for a king. And so it was rather extravagant. And you notice it's not just her. You look in 1 Kings 10:24. Are some of you following along? I'm giving you a lot of good verses. They're not all up on the screen. 1 Kings 10:24. Now all the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his heart. Each man brought his present, articles of silver and articles of gold and armor and spices, horses and mules, a set rate every year. These kings sought his presence. They wanted to hear his wisdom. They'd pay to be able to gain that knowledge and that wisdom. You know, and as I say this, I just think it's important to remember she heard of his wealth, his works, his wisdom, and his worship, and she wanted to draw upon that knowledge, that beauty. Can you imagine trying to shop for Solomon? What do you give a king who has a kingdom where everything is gold and silver is kind of kicked out the back door? But she brought something. If you're going to come before the Lord, is he a king? You know that Jesus is the son of David. Solomon is the son of David. We should be seeking his face and his wisdom. And he wants us to bring a gift. Now, I think it's good you bring your tithes and offerings to church, and we know you do that, but much more important than that, what do we give him? What does he want? What shall I render to the Lord for all his benefits towards me? I'll take the cup of salvation. I give him my heart. If he's got your heart, he's got your refrigerator, he's got your car, he's got your wallet, he's got everything. He's got to have your heart. Out of the abundance of the heart. So they bring an offering to the king. And the Bible tells us when the wise men came looking for Jesus, they came into the house, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother. They fell down and they worshiped him. And then they opened their treasures. They presented gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh, kind of like a little miniature microcosm of what the Queen of Sheba did when she wanted the wisdom of Solomon. And you know what's beautiful? He receives her. He doesn't say, get in line. He says, look, this is a great queen. She's come a long way. She's brought a great gift. She deserves my time. So Solomon gives her quality time. It doesn't say, look, I'm going to give you, I've got half an hour in my day planner. You better, as long as she stayed, he answered her questions. Now, is God too busy for you? If Solomon wasn't too busy for that queen, and what does a woman represent in Bible analogies often? A church. So we, as members of the body of Christ, husbands, love your wives as Christ loves the church. When we go to Solomon, we go to Jesus, the son of David, and we say, I've got questions. I want time with you. Did he take the time? He never said he was irritated or impatient. He gives her all the time that he wants. He receives her. Will he receive us when she comes? Now, I got to throw something in here. I don't know, Marcia, if you got that picture. A lot of people think that Sheba and Solomon had a romantic affair. Have you heard that before? They got Hollywood gets a hold of the Queen of Sheba, and you say, oh yeah, a queen goes to see a king. We know what really happened. That's one example. I grabbed that picture of Yul Brynner and Gina Lola Brigida. That's fun to say. They made a movie, Queen of Sheba. And of course, there's all this intrigue and stuff going on. It's nowhere in the Bible. They did not have an affair. I mean, Solomon's got how many wives at this point? Do you think you think the Pharaoh's daughter was really going to like that Solomon now is taking another queen? None of that happened. There were kings and queens that came from other countries. Solomon, he had a whole harem. He had what, 300 concubines, 700 wives? I sometimes get the two confused, but it doesn't really matter, does it, when you get to those numbers? And so nothing like that happened. There's not a shred of evidence in the Bible that happened. And something else that you're going to hear, a legend that's out there, and my Ethiopian friends, they say Solomon had a romantic relationship with Sheba. They had a son together, Menelik, I think was his name, and that he felt so bad that he couldn't be around to help raise his son that he gave the Ark of the Covenant to the Queen of Sheba, and it's now down in Ethiopia. Have you heard that before? And they still claim that today. That doesn't go along with the Bible. The Bible says the ark appears several other times, still in Jerusalem, long after Solomon was dead. It was still there up until the time of King Josiah, just before Nebuchadnezzar. No, so that's a beautiful legend. It's not true. There's nothing in the Bible that says they had a romantic relationship. By the way, my mother was in 2 movies with Yul Brynner. He smoked 4 packs a day and he died young. So Yeah, it's kind of sad. He made a commercial about smoking and how deadly it is when he was dying from lung cancer, but that's what you call too much information. All right, back to our sermon. After she sees and hears all of this, what really astonishes her, it doesn't say it's that Solomon was tall, dark, and handsome. It says the knowledge, the Lord, is what impressed her. Listen, 2 Chronicles 9:3, and the queen of Sheba saw the wisdom of Solomon and the house that he had built, the temple of the Lord, and the food of his table. They only had clean food on that table. And the sitting of his servants, the organization and order and design, the attendance of his ministers and their apparel, and his cupbearers and their apparel. A few years ago, Karen and I was doing a men's meeting up in Alaska, and I said, dear, let's make the most of this. I said, well, let's cruise to Alaska together, just you and me. And then I'll meet Stephen, and we went to this men's meeting, and we did that. And, you know, you go on these cruise ships. I don't know if you've ever been on a cruise before. This was like, you know, Holland American. They got really nice. And every single person in the restaurant's wearing a different uniform. And they're all spick and span, and everything is so polished. And they set your table, and when you sit down at your table, you're supposed to dress up for this, you know, this special evening meal. You sit down, it looks like a craftsman toolkit. All the different appliances you're to eat with that are spread out before you, and they're all shiny clean, and it's very impressive, and you haven't even tasted the food yet. You're going, I like it already. And can you imagine what it would have been like to sit at the table of Solomon? All the attendants and all the apparel. It says all of his vessels were gold. All his cups were gold. And she sees all of this, and then this is where you get that word, breathtaking. It says, when she saw all this, there was no more breath in her. The word there in Hebrew is ruach. It means breath. It means spirit. And you ever heard someone say, what a breathtaking view? This is where that phrase comes from. It took her breath away. And sometimes girls say, oh, he took my breath away. But what took her breath away was the wisdom of Solomon. She saw his possessions, his provisions, his people, and his piety. Now, I want you to notice, when she saw his house that he built, she saw his food that he ate. She saw the ascent by which he went up to the Lord. And when it talks about the ascent, going up to the Lord, that sometimes makes it sound like it's talking about a doorway. Actually, that means his sacrifice, his offering. Solomon, he did maybe have a special entrance from the palace for the king to worship the Lord, but you know, when Solomon dedicated the temple, he got on his knees with everybody else. And when Solomon went in to make his offering before the Lord, he was on the same level as all the people. She saw the humility of Solomon. When he left his palace and he went into the temple, he was just another sinner before God. And she was so impressed by his humility. So where it talks about the ascent there, it could sometimes be misunderstood. His food, his wisdom, his riches, his apparel. Even Jesus says, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like the flowers. When Christ wants to find a human example of the best clothes in the world, he talks about Solomon, the apparel. Now, while we're thinking about these different things, who are we really talking about when we talk about the son of David, Solomon? Solomon's name means peace. It's where you get the word shalom. And Jesus is our Prince of Peace. And it says that she's impressed with his wisdom. Well, who is it that has more wisdom? Isaiah 11:2, the Spirit of the Lord will rest upon him. This is a prophecy of the Messiah. The Spirit of wisdom, of understanding, of counsel, and might. One of the outstanding characteristics of Jesus was his wisdom, his words. The people that were sent to arrest Jesus, they came back to the priest. They said, how come you haven't arrested him? They said, never man spake like this man. So yeah, Solomon was wise, but Jesus was wiser still. His food. Jesus said, man will not live by bread alone, but by every word, the words that proceeded, the bread of God. And he could multiply physical bread. The bread of Jesus was better. Solomon was a builder, built a temple. Jesus built a temple, didn't he? He said, destroy this temple made with hands, and in 3 days I'll make one without hands. And you are living stones in the temple that our Jesus, our Solomon, built. So the sitting of his servants, he organized them in companies of 50s and 10s, and he had the 12 that he sent out, and he had the 70 that he sent out. Christ was very organized and deliberate in his servants. Look in Revelation 5:11. I looked and I heard the voice of many angels around the throne, and the living creatures and the elders. The number of them was 10,000 times 10,000s, and there in the middle somewhere you got the 144,000. You see in heaven the servants of God gathered around the throne. This is a picture. Solomon in the earthly Jerusalem is really a picture of the New Jerusalem. His riches. Who's richer? Ephesians 2 verse 7. That he might show the exceeding riches of his grace, paid for by his blood. Philippians 4:19. My God shall supply all of your need according to his riches in glory by Jesus Christ. Our Son of David is richer. Their apparel. Revelation 4:4. And around the throne were 24 thrones. And on the thrones I saw 24 elders sitting clothed in white robes. And they had crowns of gold on their head. So everything you're seeing in the story of the Queen of Sheba pursuing Solomon, it's a story of the lost out there, the foreigners that are pursuing Jesus. You know, the majority of those who ended up coming to Christ, they were not Jews. By about 80 AD, the Gentiles that had accepted Christ began to outnumber the Jews. That's why Christ said, many will come from the east and the west and sit down in the kingdom with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, like the Queen of Sheba, like Ruth and Tamar and whom I forget, Rahab, and others like Naaman and the widow who lodged there with Elijah. And all through the Bible, God is saying, I've got people, whosoever, his spices. You know what they used frankincense for? It was for worshiping God. They put that on the altar of incense in the temple. And it says the smoke, Revelation 8:4, the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints. When it talks about that incense, that spice, it's talking about the spices that Jesus offers. It's not incense, it's his blood, the merits of Christ that ascend before the Father, that covers our sin. Now with that in mind, let me read the words of Jesus. If you go to Luke chapter 11, you can also read a parallel verse in Matthew chapter 12. What's happening is the religious leaders are saying, we want to see a sign. And Jesus said, it's an evil and adulterous generation that seeks after a sign. No sign will be given but the sign of Jonah. Now, he not only mentions Jonah, he says, Jonah and the people of Nineveh will rise up against this generation because they repented at the preaching of Jonah. The Ninevites repented at the preaching of Jonah. Do you realize that Jonah went through a miracle back in the ocean with a fish, but when Jonah got to Nineveh, he never performed a single miracle. Jonah did not multiply the bread. He did not raise the dead. He did not heal the lepers. He did not heal the blind. Jesus did all of those things, and they wouldn't repent. And Jesus said, the Ninevites, the non-Jews, they were more impressed by Jonah, and he just preached that it was a short sermon. 40 days and Nineveh will be destroyed. And they repented. Said, here you've got the Son of God, and he's doing all these signs and wonders and miracles, and you're not repenting. The Ninevites are going to be your accusers in the judgment because they're greater than Jonah is here. Then Jesus goes on and he says this. Verse 31 of Luke 11, the queen of the south will rise up in the judgment with the men of this generation, the Queen of Sheba. For she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and a greater than Solomon is here. She was so hungry for the truth. She went on that journey, a grueling journey. And even if you're a queen, they still had no air conditioning back then. I mean, you had to just suffer along with your servants. She went on a very camping out every night, and with the camel smells and the flies and all the stuff that went with the caravan back then. She's got to put up with all of that because she thinks, I want to see this king. I want to see this king. I want to hear his voice. I want to ask him questions. She wanted the presence of Solomon so much. And it says she's going to rise up in the judgment with people in this generation that can't get in their air-conditioned car on Sabbath morning because they got a headache. Now, if you've got a dry cough, you better stay home. But you get my point. You know what breaks my heart? Sometimes I'll fly to another part of the world to do an evangelistic meeting. And, you know, the great expense and great effort, and you'll get this auditorium and you'll preach, and then you later learn that there were church members that were a quarter mile away that didn't want to be troubled. It would be inconvenient for them to come. And you're losing sleep and you're going through all the glory of international travel, and they won't come down the street. And Jesus said, here is this queen. Queens usually don't go through all that. They send back, she says, I'm willing to humble myself to see the king and to hear his word and to ask him questions. And she does. Is she sorry she makes the trip? She is more than satisfied. Not only does she give generous gifts to the king. Oh, by the way, I want to read something to you from the book Conflict and Courage by Ellen White. She said, by the time of the close of his visit, the queen had been so fully taught by Solomon as to the source of his wisdom and prosperity that she was constrained not to extol the human agent. She didn't honor Solomon, but to exclaim, blessed be the Lord thy God that is delighted in thee, to set thee on the throne of Israel, because the Lord loved Israel forever. Therefore he made thee king to do justice and judgment. This is the impression that God designed should be made upon all people. They were not impressed with the instrument. They were impressed with his God. I believe she became a worshiper of Jehovah. Just like the sailors on the boat after Jonah was thrown overboard and the sea went calm, it says they made offerings to Jehovah. And what did King Darius do? When Daniel survives the lion's den, he begins to extol God. That's what Nebuchadnezzar did. When the fiery furnace experience, he honors God. These people from foreign lands were to turn the other people to God. Now, the difference between Sheba and Solomon, in the original design before Christ, God had a city and he wanted people, all nations, to come to hear about the glory of God. They came to Jerusalem. They prayed towards Jerusalem. But Jesus, when he rose from the dead, he said, I'm building a different temple. So now I want you to go to them. And he said, go ye into all the world and teach all nations. You see a little bit of a different dynamic happening here. Before, they would flow unto Jerusalem to worship God. Now Christ said, you are to take me. You are a living temple. You are to take me into all the world so they can learn the truth. Yeah, back then she saw Solomon, the son of David, but we have Jesus, the son of David. For her, it was Solomon, the king of Jerusalem. We have Jesus, king of the new Jerusalem. Solomon was a king of peace. There was great peace during his reign. Jesus is the Prince of Peace. Solomon was a great builder. Jesus built a temple. And he's gone to prepare a place for you and me. Solomon was the wisest king, but Jesus is wiser still. Solomon was the richest king, but Jesus is far richer. His father owns everything. Solomon reigned 40 years. Jesus is reigning still today. And he will reign through eternity. She went all that way to gather that wisdom. Now, I'm just about done, but I want you to notice something. So after her visit, she finally has to go home. You know, the Bible promises, given it will be given to you. She goes and she makes a generous gift to Solomon. She gains all that wisdom. She has to head home. She said, now, I'd like to take something of your country to my country. Solomon says, ask whatever you want. I will give it to you. Now I want you to go. I left this out on purpose. 2 Chronicles 9:12. Now Solomon gave to the queen of Sheba all she desired. She brought a lot, but she asked a lot. He gave her whatever she asked. What does Jesus say to us? Ask. He gave her all she desired, whatever she asked, much more than she had brought to the king. Isn't that the way it is, you know? Girl comes to visit. She says, I got a gift for you. She ends up leaving with more. She got the credit card when she's gone. It says, so She left with much more. Can we ever outgive God? She ended up coming home with even more. Whatever she asked, she said, we don't have that in our country. Here, take it. What's that? Here, I'll give you 2 of them. Just anything she wanted. He's a king. He's got everything. Could you ever bankrupt Solomon? No. Can you ask too much of God? Or does he have much more for you? She went home full, richer, and satisfied. She left dissatisfied. What shall I render to the Lord for all of his benefits for me? I will take the cup of salvation and call on the name of the Lord. I want to close with this one last verse from Isaiah 60, verse 4. Isaiah 60, verse 4. Lift up your eyes all around and see. They all gather together. They come to you. Your sons, they shall come from afar, and your daughters shall be nursed at your side. Then you will see and become radiant. Your heart shall swell with joy, because the abundance of the sea shall be turned to you. The wealth of the Gentiles shall come to you. The multitude of camels shall cover your land. The dromedaries of Midian and Ephah, all those from Sheba shall come. They will bring gold and incense. They will proclaim the praises of God. How much are you willing to endure to see your king? How far are you willing to go? And your life is a quest for truth. The Bible promises, seek and you'll find. What's more important than seeking after Christ? Amen? And what do you find? You find the richest king who has all the answers for your life.
Here at Amazing Facts Ministries, we are dedicated to sharing God's Word all across Canada. We would like to extend to you the opportunity of joining us in this important work through your financial contributions. You will receive a tax-deductible receipt for your donations. It is the support of our viewers which helps make this broadcast possible. Donations can be sent to Amazing Facts Ministries. We thank you for your kindness. Join us each week as we share the Word of God that will change your life. We welcome you to check out our website, AmazingFactsMinistries.com, where you can sign up for free online Bible studies, check out our resource catalog, and watch our weekly video broadcasts. If you have a specific prayer request or a question on a topic from the Bible, send us an email. We will add you to our prayer list and help answer your questions. We hope that you've enjoyed our weekly Amazing Facts Ministries program. This week we have a special gift to share with you. It will help you better understand important biblical topics that will enhance your life and inspire you to further study the Bible. Because we believe you will find this a blessing, we will mail you this gift free of charge. Give us a call to place your order today and ask for the free offer number displayed on your screen.